So there's a lot of talk in the tech community saying the Pixel 6 Pro is a better deal than the Galaxy S20 Ultra or even the S22 Plus. I mean, you look at the price of the 6 Pro, a flagship device costing $900, then you look at the price of the S22 Ultra, which costs about $1,200, and then you ask yourself, is the Ultra really worth $300 more? The short answer is yes, but there's a lot of things we need to talk about first. The design of a phone will always be a personal preference, and even though in my original Pixel review I said I liked it, it's hard not to look at the Galaxy Ultra and realize that Samsung is generations ahead in design over Google. Thinner bezels, better fluidity between the pieces, and a cleaner camera bump. I know some people are complaining that the cameras on the S22 Ultra look boring compared to last year's S21. I completely disagree. This design is cleaner, and even though the cameras technically still do stick out, they're way better balanced when you're holding it, or at least the phone feels better balanced than it did before. Getting the back to be as flat as possible makes a lot more sense for a Note device since people will be writing and drawing on it. The Pixel 6 Pro has a very distinctive look. It's definitely different, maybe a bit too different, but it doesn't have the same refinement as the S22 Ultra. The Ultra's camera layout may look simple, but the Pixel looks like it had a visor that was crazy glued on after the device was put together. They're both big phones around the same height, but the Ultra is definitely wider. I can sort of use the Pixel 6 Pro with one hand, but not so much with the Galaxy. It could just be the fact that the Ultra is square and boxy, whereas the 6 Pro is curved, making it easier to hold. They're both big phones around the same height, but the Ultra is wider. I can sort of use the Pixel 6 Pro with one hand, but not so much with the Galaxy. It could just be the fact that the Ultra is square and boxy, whereas the 6 Pro is curved, making it easier to hold. But the one thing I truly despise are curved displays, especially the curved display on the 6 Pro. It's much too deep and the phone is way too slippery. It reminds me of the old Galaxy S6, and I find myself constantly making typos and pressing things I don't want to press. The Ultra is curved too, but it's not as deep. I don't have issues with typos, and the virtual keyboard ends right before the drop. Regardless, curved displays may look great, but it doesn't serve a purpose. So please, smartphone companies, just stop. But the one thing I still can't stand is the fingerprint scanner. Even with all the updates, the Pixel 6 Pro scanner is still hit or miss, and it's slower than the competition. Sure, it's gotten a tiny bit better with the recent updates, but it's still really poor for a flagship phone. It's to the point where I just don't even use it anymore. The S22 Ultra is a step up in the right direction, and unlike most other smartphones, it uses an ultrasonic fingerprint scanner instead of optical. It's much quicker to log on and more consistent, but it's still far from perfect. Vibration motors on both devices feel excellent when typing, with a slight edge to the Ultra. But the main difference on buying the Ultra over the Pixel is the S Pen. Personally, I rarely use it. I don't draw or take notes with a pen. I write things down using my fingers, but there's a market for it, regardless of how big or small. It works really well with the latency being reduced to 2.8 milliseconds. Doodling or writing notes feels excellent, almost mimicking what it's like to write on a piece of paper. The display on the Pixel 6 Pro is 6.71 inches, AMOLED QHD+, supports HDR10+, and it's 120 Hz. It uses an LTPO panel and can ramp up and down from 10 Hz to 120 to help save battery life. There's a peak brightness of 1100 nits, but usually averages around 500. The S22 Ultra has a bigger display at 6.8, but it too supports HDR10+ and a LTPO 120 Hz panel. But there's a few differences. For one, the Ultra's refresh rate starts at 1 instead of 10, which means slightly better battery improvements. Peak brightness is much higher at 1750 nits for better outdoor visibility. The Galaxy panel is significantly more punchy in its default vivid mode compared to the Pixel's adaptive option. The Pixel does have a boosted option, but it's not as contrasty. Both phones can be set to more of a natural look, but there's just something amazing about how vibrant Samsung tunes their displays. Now here's a fun fact. Google's Tensor chip, which is powering the Pixel 6 Pro, is actually a version of Samsung's Exynos chip. It was tuned to fit Google's specifications, but it's an Exynos processor at heart. Samsung's phone is using the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 1, at least here in North America, and a newer Exynos chip everywhere else. Now there is one thing I noticed after my first impressions video is that Samsung's RAM Plus feature, which adds virtual memory to your phone, slows down some applications such as benchmarks. But even with RAM Plus enabled, it still outperformed Google's Tensor chip in every single test. Same held true when testing the GPU performance. Apple is still years ahead of the competition, and the Adreno 730 is a big improvement over last year's 660. I ran 3D Mark's Wildlife Extreme test for 20 minutes, and the hottest the Pixel 6 Pro got was 42 degrees Celsius compared to 41 on the Galaxy S22 Ultra. The Ultra topped out at 18 frames per second compared to 16 on the Pro. Now, camera comparisons are always subjective since some prefer the look of one over the other, but the Galaxy does have better camera hardware. 108 megapixel wide lens, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and two 10 megapixel telephoto lenses. The Pixel 6 has a 50 megapixel wide lens, 48 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens. The Pixel 6 Pro can shoot up to 4 times, whereas the Galaxy S22 Ultra can optically zoom up to 10. Plus it also lets you digitally zoom up to 100 times, which lets you see where the eye can't. The main difference though comes down to computational photography and how each manufacturer has their own vision of how a photo should look. The 6 Pro often took a warmer photo, slightly crushing the shadows and not boosting up the saturation too much. The Galaxy S22 Ultra exposed a bit more naturally, but boosted the saturation for a more vibrant photo. There was also more detail due to the bigger sensor and just having more information to work with. The ultra-wide and telephoto lenses kept their color consistency when compared to the wide, but you just have more focal lengths to work with on the S22. Nighttime was great on both devices, but the Galaxy S22 did a better job of exposing when there were bright lights. And I often find the Pixel would try to brighten up the image a bit too much. This just made nighttime feel like daytime. Night mode for the front-facing camera works on both phones, but again, the Pixel tried to over-brighten the background and ended up making my face look worse. As for video, the Pixel tended to crush the shadows a bit more, which led to less detail, but it had a warmer tone. The S22 Ultra looked more vibrant and felt more realistic to what I was seeing. The image stabilization was also superior on the S22, making the footage look cleaner. This year, the Galaxy S22 Ultra finally received faster wired charging up to 45 watts. This is almost double compared to the 23 watt maximum charging on the Pixel 6 Pro. But both don't come with a charger in the box as you'd expect, and you'll have to buy adapters to support the faster charging. Wireless charging is weird on the Pixel. It can do 23 watts, the same wired charging speed, but only if you buy Google's Pixel stand. And if you don't, it can only wirelessly charge up to 12 watts. The Galaxy S22 Ultra, on the other hand, can wirelessly charge up to 15. Both phones have a massive 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and neither of them will break any records. They're more than capable of getting you through the entire day, maybe into the next, and will relieve any anxiety. Just don't expect it to beat the insane battery life of the iPhone 13 Pro Max. Now, in all my prior Pixel videos, the first thing I say about software is how much better it is on a Google device. Stock Android is clean and less cluttered, there's no bloatware or duplicative apps, and how consistent it feels. But here's the thing. This version of Android 12 on the Pixel is far from consistent. I've had apps crash, the screen flickers, and have read countless articles of others having Wi-Fi problems, camera app problems, biometric failures, touch input issues, lost signals, and refresh rates not working properly. I mean, this is pretty insane for Google since the Pixel is supposed to represent how Android should look and feel. This is why, for the first time ever on this channel, I'm going to say I prefer One UI. Don't get me wrong. I think stock Android looks better, but One UI has been rock solid. It's consistent, it doesn't lag, it just works. And that's exactly what users should expect when buying a phone this expensive. Now, if you're obsessed with Google's voice assistant, the Ultra does a great job of listening to your commands and getting you that information, but the Pixel 6 Pro is just on another level. It can transcript what you're saying much faster and getting you those results almost instantly. It feels years ahead compared to anything else I've used. The good news though is Samsung has a much better update policy than before. The Galaxy S22 Ultra will get 4 years of software updates. The Pixel 6 Pro will receive 5, but only 3 years are new versions of Android, and the last 2 will just be security updates. Regardless, this is how it should have been years ago. These phones are expensive, right? And the hardware is more than capable of supporting it. Look, the Pixel 6 Pro could have been great, but with all the issues that have been reported, it makes it tough for me to recommend. and I'd rather you pay up to $300 more to get a phone that not only works as intended, but feels consistent. Now, if you're set on a Pixel, just get the Pixel 6. It's even cheaper and pretty much offers the same feature set and a flat display. If the S22 Ultra is too expensive and you don't care about the S Pen, get the S22 Plus. The screen is a bit smaller, but it has much better battery life than the S22 normal. All right, I hope you feel more confident on picking your next phone. And if you're interested in any of these two devices, there will be links in the description down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like the video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already.